time to stop letting the world tell you who you are and step into who you truly are meant to be. Today, I'm going to ask you some deep questions, and I'm going to also ask you to be honest. Be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you're following a script you never wrote? Maybe you spent years shaping yourself into what's expected, what's acceptable, what makes other people comfortable. I was raised with the type of narrative where I was constantly being told, what will people think? I was also raised with certain societal expectations of what was appropriate for me, what was acceptable, what I could or could not do. What I ended up finding was that who I was being told to be was very different than who I was. When it was time for me to go to college, I wanted to get as far away from home as I could. It had nothing to do with my beloved mother, who was amazing, but I had other relatives sharing their 2 cents on what was appropriate for a young lady and what they expected me to do, such as go to college down the street, stay living at home until I was properly married. It went so far as being told that wearing nail polish was inappropriate and only women of the street did that. When I decided to go to the other side of the country for college, it wasn't to be wild. I've never been a wild person. It wasn't to party hard. I've never been a big partier, but it was to get to know myself outside of those voices and to embrace who Cindy was. Along the way, I realized that I was performing. I was being performative to seek out approval of family members who wanted me to be a certain way, to be a Cindy that I never was. One of the things I also realized is that I wasn't alone. There were many other people being performative for their family, for their friends. I remember, wow, 30 years ago when I was in college, having a friend who only spoke to his parents when it was time to remind them to send him a check for his living expenses. He was expected to get a business degree and to follow down the family path. He was a very sensitive soul who actually enjoyed literature and poetry and wanted to get a degree in English. But if he wanted to have his college paid for, if he wanted to be accepted by his family, he had to study finance and fall in line. That's actually what he did. And he was very sad and depressed along the way. He used to smoke a lot of weed. There was this sadness in his soul that was really heartbreaking. I was fortunate that my case was not as extreme as his, but seeing firsthand how somebody's spirit can be broken due to expectations placed on their spirit by family and friends, it's really sad. And as a result, you can end up feeling lost, stuck, disconnected. And it's usually because you're living an identity that was given to you, but not one chosen by you. I've realized that most people's identities are not theirs. This is a bit of a touchy subject, particularly because we're living in times where identity is being celebrated. But the identity that's being celebrated is often associated with race and gender. There's nothing wrong with that. I celebrate it too. But the identity I am talking about goes much deeper than your gender, your skin color, your race, your religion. I'm asking about who you are at your core. And are you really embracing that and sharing that with the world? Or are you still performing? I've met people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s still performing because they believe that is who they're supposed to be, but they're not really that person. You see it in their eyes, that sense of defeat, that sense of not being themselves. Because I've seen that so often, I'm passionate about this idea of embracing who we are because not only does it give us a stronger sense of self, it expands our consciousness as a human, as a spirit dwelling in a body living this material life. That is one of the reasons why I created a free ebook called Living Your Values Aligned with Self Love. You'll find the link on the description below. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do so. Alrighty then, let's dive in. So here's the problem that many of us have. From the moment that you are born, you're given an identity. For example, you might be the cute one, the smart one, the quiet one, the too much one, or the you're not enough. Without realizing it, you internalized that identity. You became it. In addition to that, society piled on even more identities, such as ideas on what success looks like, on how you should behave, on what makes you valuable. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking, who am I? Instead, you started asking, who do I need to be so that people will accept me? Is dangerous because what ends up happening is that your sense of self, your identity, is then being built on external validation. If you're constantly focused on external validation, you will never feel whole, no matter how much success or approval you get. Because if it's not your truth, you'll always feel like something is missing. That's why so many people who have everything they thought they ever wanted feel empty. They've been chasing an illusion instead of living their truth. And if this is hitting home for you, let me know in the comments. This isn't just an emotional thing. Social conditioning is a built in mechanism that makes you conform to the group because historically belonging meant survival. For example, if you were a part of a tribe and they rejected you, you didn't survive. If the village cast you out, you were alone and unsafe. So your brain learned to say to itself, let me be what people expect so I don't get rejected. And that's why being your true self can be scary. Because what if you get rejected? But here's something powerful. Neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to rewire itself. You do not have to stay trapped in an identity that isn't yours. You can break free. You can reprogram your beliefs and you can reclaim your true you. This begs the question, how do you reclaim your true identity? In exploring this question, things can shift, and we are going to go through a step by step process. Step one, get uncomfortably honest with yourself. Ask yourself, who am I when nobody is watching? What do I love that does not look good to love? Where am I pretending? Most people never ask these questions, and that's why they stay stuck. But not you. You can answer these questions. Get quiet, get still, listen to yourself. The real you is underneath the noise. Step two, stop asking for permission to be yourself. The truth is, if you wait for the world to give you permission to be your true self, you will wait forever. Now, you may ask yourself, what do you mean I'm going to wait forever? You see, the world benefits from you playing a role. It keeps you conformed, it keeps you from being your true self, a free thinker. But the second you'd say, no, I am choosing me, that's when everything shifts. That is what I would love for us to do today. The work that we are here to do is to break free from false identities and step into our real power. but you must be willing to do so. You may be scared, but you are more than your fears. You are courageous and you can be yourself. Step three, let go of labels that no longer fit who you are. For example, you are not just your job, your past relationships, your trauma, your achievements. Those are things you have experienced, but they are not who you are. If you decide that that's what you are, then that's going to always be your story. Think about it. Most people will face some sort of trauma in their life. When we face trauma, the pain is real, the discomfort is real, the emotional pitfalls are real. But if you decide that you're always going to be the story of the trauma, you will always be a victim. However, if you decide to acknowledge the trauma and more importantly, heal the trauma, it can be an event you experienced. It can be an event that made you wiser, more resilient, stronger, but you won't be tied down or bound to it. And you get to choose whether that is an identity you continue to take with you or to say, okay, it was an experience and it was painful and it was hard, but I've healed. With that said, I'd like to give you something more practical to do. Write down every label you've been carrying that doesn't feel true anymore. Then let them go. You are allowed to evolve. Let me share one more story with you. A couple of years ago, I was part of a prison's arts project. I was invited by the Department of Criminology at the university where I used to work to collaborate with that department. I used to be a center director. It was a really wonderful collaboration. I received security clearance. I went to a prison. I met with many incarcerated individuals. To make a long story short, I learned a lot about the criminal justice system. Not an expert by any means, but I learned a thing or two. And there was something that stuck with me from one of the incarcerated individuals. He said, I do not want to be remembered for the worst decision I've made in my life. I want to be remembered for growing, evolving, doing better, and contributing to society. When he said that, I thought to myself, how many times do we judge people for their past? How many times do we judge ourselves for our past, for poor choices, and don't give ourselves or other people an opportunity to move on, to grow, to evolve? We are allowed to do that. It doesn't mean the past didn't happen. It means we can move beyond it and evolve. Now let's move to step number four, align with your inner truth. When you start making decisions based on your truth, not what looks good, not what gets applause, but what feels deeply right, you start to align to yourself. And here's what happens when you do that: your relationships become real because they're not based on external validation. Your success becomes meaningful because you feel aligned to what you're doing. Your confidence becomes unshakable because it's not dependent on anybody but you. And all of this is because you are living in your truth. You do not need to perform. You do not need to fit in. You do not need to be what others expect because the moment you stop trying to find yourself out there and start looking in here, inside, that's when you realize you were never lost. You were buried under expectations. And now it's time for you to fully step into you. You deserve that and more because being our true selves is one of the most beautiful and empowering things to do. Thank you for being a part of this community. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Last thing, if you'd like a one on one personal session with me, All of the information is below. No more living by somebody else's script. It's time to be who you were always meant to be. Until next time, make it a great day.